The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Plaza ballroom didn't just drip light, they dripped venom. Tonight, at the Starlight Children's Foundation Gala, the most powerful people in the city had gathered, but the real show wasn't on the stage. It was at table 1. Isabella Vance, her name whispered, as the new Mrs. Blackwood was radiant. She'd just watched her billionaire lover, Damien Blackwood, publicly shame his absent wife. Isabella smiled, a true smile of triumph. She had won. Then the great oak doors swung open, the air cracked with silence. A single figure stood silhouetted, and as she stepped into the light, Damien Blackwood froze, his champagne glass hovering, his empire about to shatter. Isabella Vance stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the Park Avenue apartment, his apartment, the one he leased for her, and saw not just a woman, but a victory. The gown, a sliver of emerald silk custom-made by a designer who wouldn't have taken her call a year ago, clung to her like a second skin. It was a gown bought with Damien Blackwood's money, and it was, in her mind, her coronation dress. She wasn't born to this. She was from Scranton, a place where Gala meant the high school prom. She had come to New York with $500, a communications degree, and a desperate, aching hunger to be somebody. She had been an intern, a junior publicist, a ghost in the background of other people's important lives. And then, at a dismal product launch, she had caught the eye of Damien Blackwood. He hadn't seen a ghost. He had seen her hunger, and it had matched his own. For 6 long, clandestine months, she had been his secret. 6 months of stolen nights in penthouse suites, of private jets to islands that didn't exist on public maps, of promises whispered in the dark, promises that he was done with his wife. "She's cold, Bella," he'd said just last night, his voice a low rumble against her ear as they lay tangled in 1,000-thread-count sheets. Serafina is a statue, a beautiful, empty piece of marble. It was a merger, not a marriage. Her family's old money and my new vision. It was a deal, and the deal is done. Tonight, the merger was being publicly dissolved, Damien had assured her. The Starlight Gala was the most public, most scrutinized event of the New York social calendar. His wife, Serafina, was famously reclusive, a society ghost. She hadn't been seen at his side in almost a year. Her absence tonight, after a week of planted rumors in the gossip columns, would be the final, unspoken nail in the coffin of their marriage. And Isabella's presence, seated at his table, not hidden in the shadows but dazzling at his side, would be the announcement. The private elevator opened directly into the mezzanine of the Grand Plaza. The roar of the party, a symphony of clinking glasses, false laughter, and a live string orchestra, hit her. She paused at the top of the grand marble staircase, just as she and Damien had planned. She descended, each step a calculated performance. Chin up, shoulders back, smile like you own them, not like you want something from them. She felt the eyes on her. The men's eyes were filled with appreciation, the women's with a sharp, assessing envy. She drank it in. It was the fuel she had craved all her life. Damien was holding court near the Grand Fountain, a titan in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He was laughing, but his eyes, the color of wet cement, were constantly scanning. He saw her. The laughter died, replaced by a possessive, hungry look that made her feel a surge of power. He was hers. He met her at the bottom of the stairs, his hand landing possessively on the bare skin of her lower back, a public claim. "Isabella," he murmured, his lips brushing her ear. "You're late." "I wanted to make an entrance, darling," she breathed. "You have?" He guided her into the ballroom, a path clearing before them as if he were Moses parting the Red Sea. He was the sun, and she was the planet he had chosen to illuminate. She saw Jonathan Pierce, his shark-like lawyer, dip his head in acknowledgement, though his eyes darted nervously. And then she saw her, Dr. Evelyn Reed, stern, silver-haired, and the most powerful woman on the Blackwood Industries board. She wore her power like armor, and her sharp eyes raked over Isabella with open contempt. "Damien," Dr. Reed said, stepping directly into their path, her voice a low, commanding rasp. She didn't acknowledge Isabella. "Evelyn, a good night for the Foundation," Damien said smoothly, not stopping. Dr. Reed moved with him, a small, persistent battleship. "A word, in private, before you sit down. We'll talk Monday," Damien dismissed. "We'll talk now," Evelyn insisted, her voice low. "The board is concerned, Damien. The Asia-Pacific deal is at a crucial stage. The investors there value stability. They value tradition. This publicity." And here she finally, pointedly, looked at Isabella. "Is seen as a liability." Isabella felt a cold prickle of fear. She was the liability. Damien stopped. He turned to Evelyn, his smile gone, replaced by the predator Isabella had seen in boardrooms. "Let me be very clear, Evelyn. I am Blackwood Industries. My vision, my will. The investors trust me. This company's stock has tripled in 5 years because of me. My personal life is my own, and if you or any other board member confuses your role with that of my mother, I will happily accept your resignation." Evelyn's face, already pale, turned to granite. "You are arrogant, Damien, and arrogance is a precursor to a fall. It's only arrogance if I'm wrong," Damien said, his smile returning, but it was all teeth. "Now, if you'll excuse us. This is table 1. He steered Isabella away, leaving Dr. Reed standing alone, a statue of disapproval. "She hates me," Isabella whispered, regaining her composure, though her heart was hammering. "She doesn't like anyone," Damien replied, his grip on her back tightening, reassuring. "She only likes balance sheets. And right now, ours are looking divine. Forget her." He pulled out her chair, the premier spot at the premier table. Isabella settled in, her emerald silk dress rustling. She looked across the sea of faces, all of them looking at her. She had arrived. The shadow wife, Serafina, was a ghost, a rumor. Isabella was flesh and blood, and she was here. The gala was, as always, a spectacular bore. The auctioneer droned on about private yacht excursions and diamond necklaces. The salmon was dry. The string quartet played the same 4 Vivaldi pieces on a loop. But for Isabella, it was the greatest night of her life. Damien was a perfect performance of the attentive lover. His hand frequently found hers on the table. He leaned in to whisper observations, his breath warm on her neck. "See that man," he'd murmur. "Julian Croft. He's leveraged to his eyeballs. He'll be bankrupt by Christmas." Or, "The woman in red. My lawyer, Jonathan, is sleeping with her. He thinks I don't know. He saw the world as a chessboard, and he was always the king. Tonight, she was his queen." Jonathan Pierce, the lawyer, did look ill. He kept dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief and shooting nervous glances between Damien and the ballroom entrance, as if expecting a process server. Weak, Isabella thought. The true test came during Damien's speech. He was the gala chair, and as he ascended the stage, the room fell into a respectful hush. He was a brilliant speaker, charming and ruthless in equal measure. He spoke of legacy, of building a future, of helping the children the Foundation served. "We are all builders," he said, his voice resonating with power. "We build companies, we build fortunes, but none of it matters. None of it, if we don't build a legacy, a future." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, the hundreds of wealthy, powerful faces hanging on his every word. "A man is nothing without his partners," Damien said, and his gaze locked, with the precision of a laser, directly on Isabella. "The people who stand by you, the people who see the vision and believe in it, even when the world tells them to doubt. The people who are not afraid to live." The room followed his gaze. 1,000 eyes pivoted to table 1, to the woman in the emerald dress. The click, click, click of press cameras started, quiet at first, then growing insistent. They weren't just photographing the billionaire on stage, they were photographing the woman he had all but named as his future. Isabella felt a flush of victory so potent it was almost dizzying. This was it. This was the public declaration. He hadn't said Serafina's name. He had, in every way that mattered, erased her. He had called her a ghost, and with his words, he had made her one. When he finished his speech, he raised his glass. To the future. A future we build together. The room erupted in applause. As Damien returned to the table, basking in the adoration, a rival socialite, Beatrice Wellington, a woman who had once dismissed Isabella at a gallery opening, as the intern, walked past. Beatrice had a face like a designer handbag, expensive, stiff, and empty. My, Isabella," Beatrice purred, her voice dripping with saccharine poison. "You look comfortable. It's a big chair to fill. Serafina always sat there with such grace." This was the moment. The attack, Isabella had rehearsed for it. She didn't flinch. She simply looked up, her smile slow and radiant, and said, "She can have the grace, Beatrice. I'll take the chair." Beatrice's surgically perfected smile tightened. She had no reply. She was a creature of veiled insults, and Isabella had just met her with a velvet-covered brick. As she stalked off, Isabella's smile widened. It was a real, genuine, undeniable smile of triumph. She had taken on the New York establishment, taken on the ghost of the perfect wife, and she had won. Damien sat down, squeezing her thigh under the table. "Well handled," he murmured. He was hers. The company, the power, the name. It was all within her grasp. It was in that precise, perfect moment of victory, with her champagne glass raised and Damien's lips about to touch hers, that the world stopped. The heavy oak doors at the far end of the ballroom, the ones reserved for royalty and presidents, swung open. They hadn't been opened all night. They moved with a deep, groaning sound that cut through the chatter. A collective gasp, a sudden intake of breath, sucked the air from the room. The orchestra, sensing the shift, faltered. A single violin slid into a painful, high-pitched squeak before falling silent. Isabella turned, annoyed at the interruption. Her smile was still frozen on her face. And then she saw her. It wasn't a woman. It was an apparition. She stood framed in the massive doorway, a pool of light isolating her. She wore a gown of the deepest midnight blue, a color so dark it seemed to absorb the light around her. It was stark, high-necked, and sleeveless, a column of pure, defiant elegance. But it wasn't the gown that held the room captive. It was the impossible, undeniable, magnificent swell of her stomach. Serafina Blackwood was not just present. She was pregnant. Visibly, stunningly, undeniably pregnant. 7, maybe 8 months. Isabella's smile didn't fall. It cracked. It shattered. The blood drained from her face, leaving her lipstick a garish red slash against her suddenly pale skin. Her hand, holding the champagne flute, began to tremble. Across the table, Damien froze. It wasn't a gradual stop. It was a system-wide crash. His hand, which had been reaching for his own glass, remained suspended in mid-air. His face, usually a mask of command and control, went utterly, terrifyingly blank. The color drained from his lips, and his eyes, those cold, cement-grey eyes, widened in a way Isabella had never seen. It wasn't just surprise. It wasn't just shock. It was pure, unadulterated panic. He wasn't looking at Serafina's face. He was staring at her abdomen as if it were an armed bomb. The silence in the ballroom was a physical thing. It was a weight pressing down on 700 people. You could hear a fork scrape against a plate, a muffled cough from the back, and then the sound that broke the spell. Click, 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 click. The press, their instincts taking over, pivoted as one. The flashbulbs that had been aimed at Damien and Isabella just minutes before now turned, a barrage of white-hot light exploding against the woman in the doorway. Serafina didn't flinch. She didn't shield her eyes. She didn't pose. She simply absorbed the light, her expression serene, almost beatific. She looked like a Renaissance painting of a Madonna, if the Madonna had a spine of steel and a 10-carat diamond on her finger. How? Isabella's mind screamed. How? Damien had sworn they were estranged, that they hadn't shared a bed in over a year. A statue, he'd called her. Cold marble. Marble didn't get pregnant. Then Serafina moved. She glided into the room, not with the hesitant steps of a woman entering a hostile environment, but with the unhurried grace of a queen returning to her court. The crowd didn't just part for her. They recoiled, as if her very presence was a force field. She looked neither left nor right. She was a torpedo, and she had a target. Damien, Isabella whispered, her voice a dry rattle. Her throat had closed. Damien, who? What is this? It's a trick. It's a prosthetic, right? Damien didn't answer. He couldn't. He was a statue now, the very thing he'd accused his wife of being. Isabella's mind raced, a frantic, desperate calculation. If she's pregnant, and he's been with me for 6 months, then the baby is his. He was sleeping with her. He was sleeping with her while he was with me. He lied. The entire foundation of her victory, her coronation, was built on a lie. Serafina's gaze swept the room, calm and dispassionate, cataloguing every face, every stunned expression. But her eyes were not on the crowd. They were fixed, with chilling precision, on table 1. She passed Dr. Evelyn Reed, who was staring at Serafina's stomach with a look of stunned, sudden, terrifying calculation. She passed Jonathan Pierce, who looked physically ill and was stuffing his handkerchief back into his pocket. She was heading right for them. "Do something!" Isabella hissed, grabbing Damien's arm. His bicep was rock hard, frozen. "Damien, say something!" He finally moved, a jerky, puppet-like motion. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly, knocking against the table. The sound was a gunshot in the silent hall. "Serafina!" His voice was a strained croak that echoed. He sounded like a child. Serafina Blackwood stopped directly in front of their table. She was close enough for Isabella to smell her perfume, a light, cold scent, like jasmine and snow. It was expensive, and it was old. She looked at Isabella first. Her eyes, a shade of blue so pale they were almost silver, swept over the emerald dress, the diamonds at her throat, with a look of supreme, crushing indifference. She didn't see a rival. She saw a thing. Then, finally, she looked at her husband. She tilted her head, a small, curious gesture. "Hello, Damien," she said. Her voice was clear, melodic, and carried through the entire ballroom. "You seem to have forgotten something." Damien stared at his wife. His mind, usually a fortress of strategy and counter-moves, was a smoking ruin. "Serafina, what are you doing here? You. He gestured helplessly at her stomach. You were supposed to be in Zurich. Your mother. Mother is fine, Serafina said, her voice dangerously pleasant. She sends her regards. She placed a delicate, perfectly manicured hand on the apex of her stomach. And I'm attending the Starlight Gala. The one you chair, the one my family has funded for 3 decades. Or did that slip your mind? Isabella, seeing her entire future evaporating, made a fatal error. She stood. She tried to reclaim the power, to assert her position, to make herself a part of the conversation, and not just a spectator to her own execution. Damien, darling, she said, her voice trembling but loud, desperate. Why don't you introduce us? Serafina's head turned, a slow, deliberate motion. She regarded Isabella as one might, an interesting, slightly distasteful piece of modern art. Oh, I don't think that's necessary, Serafina said. Everyone knows who you are, Miss Vance. You're the entertainment. The word hung in the air, a perfectly thrown dagger. It struck Isabella with physical force. Entertainment, a toy, a distraction, a thing to be used and discarded. Not a queen, not even a pawn. Just entertainment. Now, Serafina said, turning back to Damien, her voice dropping the pretense of politeness. Damien, we need to talk. This is not the time or the place, Damien hissed, finally finding his footing. His panic was coalescing into rage. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her skin. This stunt is insane. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing me. Serafina looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. She didn't pull away. She just waited. Her stillness was more powerful than any scream. Slowly, as if his fingers were being burned, he released her. I'm not the one who's embarrassed, Damien, she said, but you're about to be. She turned slightly, just enough to address the tables nearest them, where the board members and key investors were seated, watching with rapt horror. Good evening, Dr. Reed. Jonathan. Mr. McGregor, she said, nodding to Thomas McGregor, the company's CFO. McGregor, a pale, nervous man who always looked like he was about to sneeze, nodded back, his eyes wide. Serafina, Dr. Reed said, her voice sharp. This is highly irregular. Irregularity seems to be the theme of the evening, Serafina replied, her gaze flicking back to Isabella. My husband has just given a lovely speech about partners and building a future. I'm simply here to clarify which future he means. She caressed her stomach. Is it this one? She asked the room at large. The one carrying the Blackwood heir? A new, shocked wave of whispers erupted. Heir. The word was a bombshell. Blackwood Industries was a public company, but Damien ran it like a dynastic kingdom. An heir changed everything. Or, Serafina continued, her voice rising, is it the future he's planning with a woman he's been funding with a corporate credit card? Isabella's blood ran cold. That's a lie, she spat, her voice shrill. Is it? Serafina's eyes were twin blue flames. Shall we ask Mr. McGregor? I believe he has the expense reports. The apartment you're living in, Miss Vance, the one on Park Avenue. It's leased by a shell corporation, a subsidiary of Blackwood Industries, filed under R&D, a fact I'm sure the board will find fascinating. Thomas McGregor looked like he was about to faint. Dr. Reed's face went from pale to purple. This wasn't just infidelity, this was fraud. You're insane, Damien snarled, his mask of civility completely gone. You're ruining me. No, Damien, Serafina said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper meant only for him. You ruined yourself. I'm just here to file the paperwork. And as if on cue, a second figure stepped out of the shadows of the doorway. He was an older man, with a shock of white hair and a face that looked carved from granite. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a dark, severe, and devastatingly expensive suit. He was carrying a slim leather briefcase. That's Arthur Hayes," someone whispered at a nearby table. "Serafina's father, the Lion of Zurich. I thought he was retired." Arthur Hayes walked steadily, his footsteps loud in the silence, and stood beside his daughter. He didn't look at Damien. He didn't look at Isabella. He looked at the board members. "Evelyn." "Thomas," Arthur said, his voice a low baritone that commanded authority. "My apologies for the theatricality. My daughter can be stubborn." He smiled briefly at Serafina. "But she is correct. It appears we have a leadership crisis. This wasn't a domestic squabble. This wasn't a jealous wife crashing a party. This was a coup. Damien Blackwood's world had compressed into a single, blinding pinpoint of rage and terror. The ballroom, the guests, the half-eaten dinners, it all dissolved into a humming, nightmarish background. The only things that were real were Serafina, her hand resting on the impossible curve of her stomach, and Arthur Hayes, his face a death mask of corporate retribution. "You can't do this," Damien said, his voice low and guttural. "You can't call a board meeting here, in a ballroom. It's not legal." "Oh, it's perfectly legal," Arthur said, his voice as dry as old parchment. "The bylaws state a meeting can be called by any two majority stakeholders. I am one. My daughter, who holds her grandmother's original voting shares in trust, is the other. We have," he gestured to Dr. Reed, Thomas McGregor, and two other board members who were already rising from their tables, their faces grim. "A quorum." "The Carlton Suite. 10 minutes," Arthur commanded. He looked at Damien, his eyes as cold as a Swiss winter. "You're invited, of course, as is your lawyer." He gave Jonathan Pierce a look of profound disgust. Jonathan, for his part, was gathering his briefcase, his hands shaking so badly he could barely work the clasp. "Damien, we need to fight!" Damien snarled. Arthur Hayes turned to his daughter. His entire demeanor softened, the granite face cracking into a look of paternal concern. "Serafina, you shouldn't be standing. Let's get you seated." "No," Serafina said. "I'm not staying. My work here is done." She looked at Damien one last time, and for the first time he saw a flicker of something other than ice. It was pity. It was the most insulting, devastating expression she could have worn. "You were right about one thing, Damien," she said quietly. "It was a merger, and I just executed the buyout clause." She turned, and with her father's hand on her back, she walked, not glided this time, but walked, with the heavy, deliberate steps of a very pregnant woman. Back toward the doors, the crowd parted for her again. But this time the whispers were different. They were not of scandal. They were of awe. Damien was left standing in the ruins. Isabella was still frozen by the table, tears now tracing clean paths through her expensive makeup. "Damien?" she whispered, her voice broken. "He's lying, right? The apartment. You told me it was a gift from you." Damien rounded on her, his face a mask of primal fury. "You!" he spat. "You did this! You pushed me! You demanded this! You, with your incessant whining about being a secret! You were supposed to be fun! You were supposed to be easy! I... Isabella flinched, stepping back. "Get out!" he snarled. "Damien, please, don't leave me! Get out!" he roared. The entire ballroom heard it. Isabella, in her triumphant emerald dress, grabbed her clutch and fled. She pushed through the stunned guests, her sobs echoing behind her, a public spectacle of ruin. Damien stood alone, panting. He adjusted his tuxedo. He straightened his tie. He was Damien Blackwood. He had lost skirmishes before. This was just a larger skirmish. He turned to his lawyer. Jonathan, the Carlton suite. Now, we're going to counter-sue. We'll ruin them. We'll prove she's unstable, hysterical, a pregnant woman's delusions. Jonathan Pierce just shook his head, his face ashen. Damien, you don't understand. The morality clause. What morality clause? It's boilerplate. It's in every charter. No one enforces that. Arthur Hayes enforces it, Jonathan said, his voice flat. He wrote it into the original charter himself, back when he gave you the seed money. Actions that bring the company into public disrepute. Damien, you just had your pregnant wife, the daughter of your primary stakeholder, interrupt a gala to announce your affair, which you funded with corporate assets. You're not just in disrepute. You are the disrepute. In the Carlton suite, the atmosphere was funereal. Dr. Reed, Arthur Hayes, and the other board members were seated. Serafina was on a large video screen, live from her car. She looked composed. Thomas McGregor, the CFO, was at the head of the table, his laptop open. Thomas, Arthur said, if you will. McGregor nodded, his hands trembling. As you all know, Serafina has been the primary negotiator on the Asia-Pacific merger for the last 18 months. Damien, standing in the doorway, felt his stomach clench. What? He thought she'd just been a translator, a pretty face for the traditionalist investors. 8 months ago, McGregor continued, Serafina, Mrs. Blackwood, came to me. She had discovered irregularities. Damien was using the merger negotiations as a smokescreen to leverage the company's pension fund for a series of high-risk, high-yield personal investments. He was, in effect, gambling our employees' retirement to cover other expenses. What expenses? Dr. Reed demanded. Miss Vance? Serafina's voice cut in from the speaker. The apartment, the cars, the jet to Fiji, the consulting fees. The total comes to $8.4 million. A collective gasp. He told me the pension fund reallocation was a standard buffer for the merger. Dr. Reed was white-hot with rage. He lied to the board. He lied to everyone, Arthur said. He bet everything, including his unborn son's legacy, on the fact that he was the only smart one in the room. The motion on the table, Dr. Reed said, her voice shaking with fury, is for the immediate removal of Damien Blackwood as CEO and chairman of the board, pending a full investigation into criminal fraud. All in favor? Aye, said Arthur. Aye, said McGregor. Aye, said the 2 other board members. Dr. Reed raised her hand. Aye, the motion carries. Damien Blackwood didn't roar. He didn't fight. He just slid down the doorframe, the world dissolving into a high-pitched ringing in his ears. He had lost. In 20 minutes, he had lost it all. Isabella didn't stop running until she was blocks away, the cold November air slicing through her thin silk dress. Her heels, so elegant on the marble staircase, now clicked desperately on the dirty pavement. A cabby, seeing a woman in a couture gown sobbing, pulled over, thinking he'd found a high-paying, dramatic fare. Where to, lady? Park Avenue, she choked out. The apartment, which hours before had felt like her palace, her fortress of victory, now felt like a gilded cage. The flowers Damien had sent were wilting. The champagne on ice was warm. She ripped the diamonds from her throat, his diamonds, and threw them against the wall. They scattered, worthless. She looked at her reflection in the dark, blank television screen. The triumphant queen was gone, replaced by a terrified, humiliated girl from Scranton. Entertainment. The word echoed in her head. A toy. She had given him everything, her body, her time, her loyalty. She had believed his lies, his promises of a future. She had seen Serafina as a fading photograph, not a living, breathing, pregnant opponent. She had lost Damien. She had lost her reputation. By morning, she would be the laughingstock of New York. But she wasn't just humiliated. She was terrified. The lease, the shell corporation, fraud. Serafina hadn't just known about the affair. She had known the finances. And if she knew that, what else did she know? Isabella was not just a mistress. She was a co-conspirator, whether she knew it or not. She had signed things. Consulting fees, he'd called them. She thought it was just a tax dodge. Her desperation was not just about love or status. It was about survival. She picked up her phone, her fingers shaking. She didn't call her mother. She didn't call a friend. She scrolled to a number saved under MT. It rang once. "Tell me." The voice was cold, sharp, and impatient. "Marcus," she whispered, tears choking her. "It's over. He's finished." "What happened at the gala?" The voice was Marcus Thorne, Damien's biggest rival, the CEO of Thorne Global. "His wife." "She came," Isabella sobbed. "She's pregnant, Marcus. She's pregnant, and she brought her father. They're ruining him. They knew everything. The apartment, the money. They knew." There was a long, cold silence on the other end. "Did they mention you?" "Yes." "No. I mean, she called me. She called me entertainment. She said the apartment was a corporate lease. They're taking everything from him. And you, Isabella," Thorne's voice was devoid of sympathy, "did you get what I paid you for?" This was Isabella's second, darker secret. She wasn't just Damien's mistress. She was Marcus Thorne's spy. Thorne had approached her 3 months ago. It was after Damien had humiliated her, not just stood her up, but she'd seen a picture of him and Serafina at a family funeral. A united front. He'd called Isabella a child for being upset. Thorne had found her at the bar of the Carlisle, seething. He hadn't offered her a drink, he'd offered her a deal. "He's using you," Thorne had said, his eyes like a shark's. "So use him. He's ambitious, but he's sloppy. I want his vulnerabilities. The Asia-Pacific deal. I want his data." He'd offered her $2 million, enough to disappear, enough to take care of her mother's medical bills forever. "Marcus," she said, her voice small. I got the file, the final merger draft, his personal server. I have it all. It's in a safe deposit box." "You're a fool," Thorne snapped. "You were supposed to just feed me the data, not hold it. You're compromised, Isabella. You've been publicly tied to him. You're a liability. If they're investigating him for fraud, they're going to investigate you, and when they find you, they'll find me." But you promised," Isabella cried. "You promised you'd take care of me. The money." "The deal is off. You're tainted," Thorne said. "Don't call this number again. If you ever mention my name, I will personally see to it that you are charged with corporate espionage. You're on your own." The line went dead. Isabella stared at the phone. He had cut her loose. Serafina had destroyed her reputation. Damien had discarded her, and Thorne had abandoned her. She was alone. She was going to be the scapegoat. They were all going to pin it on the slutty, gold-digging mistress. She sat there for a long time, the silence of the expensive apartment pressing in. The fear was a cold, hard knot in her stomach. But beneath the fear, something else was growing. A white-hot, acidic rage. They had all used her. Damien, Marcus, even Serafina, using her as a public prop for her coup. They all thought she was just a pretty, stupid toy. "No," she whispered, her voice a low growl. She walked to her desk, to her laptop. She still had a copy of the files from the safe deposit box. She had meant to use it as leverage against Damien if he ever tried to leave her. But now, it was a bomb. It wasn't just the Asia-Pacific deal. It was everything. Damien's digital black book, the offshore accounts, the real balance sheets, and most importantly, the email chains. Email chains that implicated Damien, and Arthur Hayes, and Dr. Reed, and, yes, even Marcus Thorne, who had been trying to collude on prices with Damien for years. "If I'm going down," she said to the empty room, her fingers flying across the keyboard, "I'm taking you all with me." She opened a new, encrypted email. She addressed it to the Times, the Wall Street Journal, the SEC, and a dozen financial bloggers. The subject line, "The Blackwood Papers." She attached the file, and she hit send. The Isabella Papers, as a young insomniac blogger at Gawker dubbed them at 6:01 a.m., didn't just detonate. They vaporized an entire landscape of power, a digital shockwave that radiated outward at the speed of light. By 6:15 a.m., the European markets, already open for hours, saw the first wave. Blackwood Industries' secondary listings in Frankfurt and London went from stable to delisted in under 10 minutes. The pre-market in New York, sensing the blood, triggered an automatic halt before the opening bell even had a chance to ring. At 6:30 a.m., Marcus Thorne, CEO of Thorne Global, awoke in his minimalist penthouse, not to his gentle sunrise alarm, but to the frantic, panicked buzzing of his private, encrypted phone. 57 missed calls. His chief counsel was on the line, his voice a terrified whisper. "Marcus, it's over. Turn on the news. Any of it. She did it. The girl. She burned us all." Thorne, a man who had orchestrated hostile takeovers and ruined fortunes before breakfast, fumbled for the remote. He saw his own name, his own emails, in a Wall Street Journal expose under the headline, "Titans of Fraud." He, too, had underestimated the entertainment. His first call wasn't to his board, it was to his fixer. "Get me a plane and find her." But it was too late. At 6:45 a.m. in Zurich, Arthur Hayes, the Lion, was in his oak-panelled study, sipping a rare oolong tea. He was reviewing the controlled press release he and Serafina had drafted. A smooth transition of power, it was called, painting Damien's exit as a voluntary sabbatical. His assistant, Helena, a woman who had worked for him for 30 years and had never once raised her voice, entered without knocking, her face white. She held a tablet. "Arthur, you must see." He read the email chains, the ones he was in, the old ones, the ones from 2018, the payoff to the senator, the dirty deal he'd helped Damien cover up to protect the family name, a youthful mistake he'd thought long buried. The mistress hadn't just leaked Damien's files, she had leaked all of them. She had burned the kingdom, the usurper, and the rightful Queen's army all in one. The Lion of Zurich, for the first time in his life, felt his hands begin to tremble. At 7:15 a.m., Damien Blackwood was in his home office, a vast space of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. He was screaming into the phone at Jonathan Pierce. "You fix this. File injunctions. Sue every last one of them for slander. I want her ruined. I want her in jail." "Damien," Jonathan's voice was a dead, hollow sound. "You need to stop talking. You need to hang up the phone. And you need to turn on your television. Any channel." Damien snarled. "I don't have time for TV, you idiot! I have to— Turn it on, Damien! Now!" Damien clicked it on. It wasn't the Society page. It wasn't page 6. It was CNN, MSNBC, and Fox Business, all in a rare moment of unity. The headline, "Blackwood, CEO accused of pension fraud, market manipulation, and racketeering. The blood in his veins turned to ice. This wasn't a scandal. This was a prosecution. Panic, a cold and unfamiliar animal, seized him. He hung up. He ran to his safe. Passport, a brick of cash, 3 of his most expensive watches, a Patek, a Vacheron, an Audemars. He was still thinking like a rich man. What he could barter. He didn't grab a photo, a memento, nothing. He ran, his heart hammering, to the private elevator. By 8:05 a.m., his driver, oblivious, was speeding him to the private airfield in Teterboro, New Jersey. His Gulfstream was on the tarmac, fueled and ready. He felt a moment of relief. He could get to the Cayman Islands, to his real money, the money they didn't know about. He could fight this from there. He stepped out of the car, his briefcase in hand, the jet fuel, a welcome, acrid smell of escape. Mr. Damien Blackwood. He turned. Not a pilot, a man in a dark, ill-fitting suit, holding up a badge. Behind him, 3 black SUVs, their lights now flashing, blocked the Gulfstream on the tarmac. Mr. Blackwood, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, the agent said, his voice devoid of any emotion. You have the right to remain silent. Damien didn't hear the rest. The sound of the wind, the whine of a distant jet, and the cold, metallic click of the handcuffs as they closed around his wrists, scraping against the platinum of his timepiece. The billionaire who had commanded ballrooms was on his knees on the tarmac, a federal agent's hand on his head. He was in denial, his mind already spinning. This is a mistake, a procedural error. Jonathan will have me out by lunch. But as they pushed him into the back of the SUV, the hard plastic of the seat, a shocking, proletarian insult. A cold dread began to set in. The blast radius was total. Thomas McGregor, the loyal CFO, was arrested at his desk in the open plan office, weeping as he was led past the stunned, silent employees. His separate ledger for Serafina was seen by the FBI not as whistleblowing, but as complicity and a desperate attempt to pick a side. Dr. Evelyn Reed was met by 2 agents in the polished marble lobby of her spin studio. Her 40-year career, her reputation as the iron-willed titan of the board, ended in a single, humiliating perp walk, still in her $200 leggings. Weeks later, the dust had begun to settle into a thick, grey ash. Damien was out on bail, a $50 million bond paid by a dwindling, non-frozen trust. His ankle monitor, a thick, black plastic shackle, was a humiliating, beeping reminder of his fall. His assets were frozen. His lawyers were abandoning him, like rats from a ship that was not just sinking, but had been torpedoed. He found Serafina. She wasn't at their mansion, which was being seized by the banks. She was in a quiet, elegant, and much smaller apartment overlooking the river. An apartment paid for by her father's old money trust, which the scandal couldn't touch. It was bright, filled with plants, and smelled of lemon polish, not the sterile, museum-like chill of their old home. He entered, using the code she'd given his new, court-appointed lawyer. She was in a small, sunlit room, assembling a white wooden crib. Her assistant, a young woman named Maria, nodded at him and quietly left the room, closing the door. Serafina was even more pregnant now, her body heavy, but her face was serene. She was trying to fit a small wooden peg into a hole, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was building. You, he breathed, his voice raw. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his suit hung on him, and his eyes were bloodshot and haunted. The commanding aura was gone, replaced by a jittery, feral energy. You did this. You. I planned to remove you, Damien, she said, not looking up from the crib. A surgical removal. I had buyouts prepared, a new PR team on standby, a controlled narrative about your sabbatical. It was clean. She finally looked at him, her pale blue eyes clear. You and your mistake were the ones who burned it to the ground. She was your variable, Damien, the one you never controlled. You thought she was a toy, and you left her in a room full of matches. He sank into a small rocking chair by the window, his last reserves of energy gone. He looked, for the first time since she'd known him, like a broken man. What was it all for, Serafina? He whispered. Your revenge. Was it worth it? The company is gone. Your father is facing a Senate inquiry. Your name is mud. I have nothing. We have nothing. Serafina stopped her work. She turned to face him, her hands on her stomach. You still don't get it, she said. You think this was about the company. You think it was about money. She walked with that same heavy, deliberate tread until she was standing over him. You accuse me of being cold, she said, her voice low and intense, of being marble. Do you know why, Damien? I was 22 when we got married. I loved you. I adored you. I thought you were a god. I used to plan your surprise parties. I knew your favorite colored tie. I was your biggest cheerleader. Her face hardened. And on our honeymoon, in Positano, you took a business call that was a wrong number. I found out later her name was Chloe. 6 months after that, I found a receipt. Not for a business dinner. For a ruby necklace. My birthday was the next week, and you gave me a gift certificate to a spa. The necklace I later saw was on Simone. Serafina, you don't get to stop me, she snapped. This isn't a board meeting you can adjourn. You didn't just cheat, Damien. You corroded me. It wasn't one day. It was 1,000 small deaths. Every time you looked at your phone and smiled, then put it away when I entered the room. Every time you called me sweet but uninformed. You didn't just freeze me, Damien. You taught me how. I learned your game. I learned to be cold, to be tactical, to document, to wait. And the baby? He asked, his voice cracking, a final, desperate plea for a different answer. Was he part of the plan too? A prop? A weapon? This was the first time her composure broke. A flicker of real, deep pain crossed her features. The baby, she said, placing a hand on her stomach, was an accident. A final, cruel joke from the universe. She looked away, out the window. One last night, after the Asia-Pacific negotiations in Shanghai. You were human. You were the man I married just for that night. You were proud. You were proud of me. You said, we did it. You held my hand at dinner, and you listened to me. And I was so tired, Damien. So tired of the ice, and the anger, and the loneliness. I let myself believe, for one night, that you had changed. She took a shaky breath. I found out I was pregnant a week later, and I was terrified. Then I was clear. He wasn't a weapon. He was my reason. He was the one thing in this entire mess that was real. He gave me the strength to pull the trigger on a plan I'd been building for years. I will not have him raised by a man like you. I will not have his first memory be of a father who sees people as entertainment or marble. He will not have your name. He will have mine. He will be a haze. The finality of it hit him. It wasn't just the company. It wasn't just the money. He had lost his son. So what now? He asked, a hollow shell. Serafina walked to a small, elegant desk. She picked up a sheaf of papers and a pen. Now, she said, you leave. You will sign these. The divorce papers. And this. She tapped a second document. This relinquishes your parental rights. You will give me a clean, absolute break. And if I don't? He asked, a tiny spark of defiance. I'll fight you. I'll drag this out. And I'll bury you, she said, her voice like Arctic wind. "You have no leverage, Damien. None. Sign the papers, and I will be merciful." "Merciful?" He laughed, a dry, broken sound. "My father's legal team. They will add you to his defense. They are the best in the world. They can't save you, but they will mitigate. They will argue for a plea. You will get a shorter sentence. You will go to a white-collar facility in a comfortable climate. Not the federal hellhole you're currently heading for. You'll be in a cell with other men like you. Men who flew too high. You can all talk about your bad luck together. It's the best you deserve." It was a final, cold and calculated mercy. A business transaction. Damien Blackwood stood up. He looked at the woman he had underestimated, the wife he had called a statue. She was not marble. She was steel. He took the pen, his hand trembling, and signed his name, his lineage, his entire future away. He walked out of the apartment, a free man for now, but a man who had absolutely nothing left. As for Isabella Vance, she was never seen in New York again. She had blackmailed Marcus Thorne for $2 million in Bitcoin before she hit send on the email, and she was gone. Some say she took that money and is living in luxury in Dubai. Others say she's in witness protection. But the truth is, she's a barmaid in a small, dusty town in Arizona, using the name Maria, her hair a mousy brown. She lives in a hot, cramped apartment above the bar. She has $2 million in a digital wallet she can never use, because using it would create a trail. She is a ghost, just as she'd accused Serafina of being, but a different kind. She's a hunted ghost. Every night, she wipes down the bar, the smell of stale beer and bleach on her hands. She looks at the bar's old TV, where a news report might flash a picture of Damien's trial. She sees her own reflection in the dark screen. A customer's hand on her arm makes her jump, and she has to force a smile, forever looking over her shoulder. That is the story of how one night of triumph became a lifetime of consequences. It wasn't just a marriage that ended at that gala. It was an entire empire. It shows us that the brightest lights often cast the darkest shadows, and the people we underestimate, the cold wife, the foolish mistress, are often the ones holding the detonator. What seems like a victory can be the first step toward ruin, and in a war of revenge, the blast radius can consume everyone, even the person who lit the fuse. What did you think of Serafina's plan? Was she a brilliant strategist, or did her revenge go too far? And what about Isabella? Was she a victim, a villain, or both? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy real-life drama and stories with twists you never see coming, please like this video and share it with someone who loves a good story. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.